So here we have Andrea the architect, and she is going to be in charge of creating releases. To create the release, she's going to do git flow release start. And we have to give the release a name. So let's call this release Sprint 1 release. And then git flow will go through a similar process that it does for features. So it's going to create a new branch, in this case called release/sprint1 release. It will check out that branch. Now again, this branch only exists on this machine. Now it's highly likely, in fact very probable, that with the release branches, we want these branches shared. This branch has to go to other people so they can test the release. So we do git flow release publish, and we name the release. So it's going to be sprint1-release. And this has the effect of setting up a tracking branch with the remote repository and pushing the release to the remote repository. So if I go to the browser and go to GitHub and look at my branches, there we can see the release branch. So we have a release called Sprint1 release. And this is now ready for somebody to work on. So at this point, the release is out and it's being checked, it's being tested. If other people want to look at this release code, then again, we can use a similar command that we use for features. We can track the release. So here we are on Dan's machine, and Dan can do a git flow release track, and again, give the release a name. So we can have sprint1-release. And again, this pulls that release onto Dan's machine. So we now have a working copy of this release branch on Dan's machine. And Dan can make any changes he needs to the release. So Dan's now on the release branch. And we have somebody testing the code, let's say QA. And QA come along and go, they found an error. Maybe some omission, something that needs changing in the code. So for example, here, we throw an exception, but we're not logging the fact that this exception has been thrown. So we might decide that we have to log this. So we do a log.debug and we pass in the exception. So a simple change. So that change has been made on the release branch. And if I do a git status here, we can see the change. So Dan will need to do the normal git thing. So he'll need to add this change. And he'll need to commit the change to his local repository. So we can do a git commit here with a message. So again, not a great message here, but add logging to exception. And then once we have that, we can push the change. So that change has now been made to the release branch, which is all well and good. And when we publish this release branch, the change will get pushed into master. However, we also have to ensure that that change makes it into the development branch. So Dan's on the release branch, and the changes on the release branch have to make it into the develop branch. So Dan has to check out develop, and we'll do this using normal git command. So git checkout develop. Once we have that, we'll do a git pull, just to make sure there are no remote changes that we don't know about. We do a git merge from release/sprint1-release. So we've now merged onto the develop branch. We check the code on the develop branch, and sure enough, the code is here. And once we've merged these changes, we need to push them back to the main branch. So we do a git push here, and we push the changes back up to the central repository. So these changes have now been made both on the release branch and on the develop branch. If we go back to GitHub just to check this, we can see there's a change on the develop branch. And if I look in the source folder at the main and in the service, and it's the enter repository service here, we can see there's the call to log.debug. So this change has definitely been made on the develop branch.